I think there are two traditions, one quintessentially the Israeli, one Jewish, that we ought to look at and to think about. The Israeli one is that since we've had soldiers fall in the battlefield and victims of terror here in this country, we've had this elision from Yom HaZikaron, the day of memorial, to Yom HaAtzmaut, the day of independence, from sadness and bereavement to celebration. Hamas has turned the tables on us, and it's given us a circumstance wherein we now have the celebration and the elation of the return of these 20 hostages alive, thank God. But we also now have moved into this situation of deep, deep, deep uncertainty, and quite frankly, the inability to grieve as we fully need to as a nation. So the mood on the street, I went for a long run today along the promenade. The mood on the street is not that of unbridled joy, nor should it be. And from a Jewish perspective, remember, the Jewish people each Passover dip their finger in the cup of wine to mark the suffering of the Egyptians who were killed as we crossed the Red Sea, to show that even as another people are harmed, our cup of joy does not overflow. If that's what we do to commemorate the suffering and the loss of the Egyptians' lives who held us in bondage in the land of Egypt, how much more so should our cup be half empty at this time when we have so many of the dead hostages yet to come home, so many of our people still hanging in the balance for word on whether they will be recovered, these bodies, or not. And I do want to draw everybody's attention to something. In 2014, Hadar Goldin was killed in the Gaza Strip during Operation Protective Edge. His remains were dragged through the tunnels of Gaza and are held for ransom to this very day. His family has battled alone since 2014 for the recovery of his remains. They were joined by the masses only after the horrors of October 7th, which fashioned this enormous collective of families that were missing their loved ones. I think about him. I think about his twin brother Tzor. I think about his parents Leah and Simcha Goldin. And I say that this war, in my opinion, cannot end until such time as all of the hostages, not just those taken on October 7th, but also those who predate that, are brought home, repatriated to Israel and laid to proper rest. Then we will rest. Well, the outrage from around the world is precisely where it's been for the vast majority of this conflict, namely absolutely nowhere, completely absent. I'm not surprised by that. I have to tell you, I know it's not popular to say, without necessarily any of us knowing the details of what militia or which militia it is that Hamas is rounding up. I do recall the words of Menachem Begin when there was the Iraq-Iran war, and he was asked to state his opinions on it, and he said, I wish the best of luck to both sides. It seems to me that one group is replacing another group. It all looks all too familiar to me, and it shows that the disarmament and the demilitarization of Hamas simply is not happening. Now, there is a clause in the 20-point deal that is very Kushner-esque. I noticed that a similar clause was there within the list and the outline of what was called the deal of the century, or peace to prosperity, and that's the clause that says, even if Hamas doesn't agree to this, certain aspects of the agreement will begin in the absence moving forward with it. So I think that you could see real elements moving towards disarmament of Hamas, the demilitarization of Hamas, but the priorities remain the same. The first is to get these deceased hostages back. I just want to go back, if I may, just for a moment or two. You know, I had the privilege of working very closely with Eli David, the brother of Eviatar David, and his mother Galia, less so with his father Avishai, but we know them very, very well throughout this crisis, and also to some degree with Gal Gilboa Dalal, the brother of Guy Gilboa Dalal. It's wonderful to see them home. But again, we think about the amputees, the soldiers who gave so much, to sacrifice so much to bring them home. And of course, the soldiers who fell in this battle. And there's one line from the epitaph that I think is very, very fitting and befitting of this moment, that commemorates the fallen during World War II. And it says to the survivors of that war, to the forces who survived it, it says, when you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow, we gave our today. The soldiers who fell so that pictures like that would circulate throughout the airwaves and on our screens. And it's worth understanding that it was not a fall for no purpose, for no reason, but for a wonderful, wonderful outcome. I would say no less miraculous than the parting of the Red Sea incident.
And talking of the soldiers who fell so that moments like this could happen, Captain Daniel Perez has a funeral tonight at Mount Herzl in Jerusalem. This will be the second time that his family have had a ceremony to say goodbye to him. The first time was with a piece of clothing with his blood on it. This time it's with his body, and he gets honored as a man killed defending the country in a tank. On the 7th of October, he was, of course, regarded as a missing hostage for 163 days, and only then was it confirmed he was actually murdered on that day by terrorists on the 7th of October while saving so many lives. Today, he gets a full burial.
Yeah, he gets a full burial. And of course, hopefully, we hope that his family will be bound up among the mourners of Zion. Incidentally, a very similar dynamic occurred with Hadar Goldin. There was a small fraction, a small piece of his body that was found, that was buried. And hopefully his family will have the opportunity to bury him when he is returned by way of this release of the deceased hostages as well. But these are absolute heroes. These are people who were willing to give all that they have and all that they were in the defense of our people and to bring our people home. And it's worth mentioning just the distinction in the two societies. Who are we celebrating being brought back unto us? Our innocents, men, women, children, even the soldiers who were arrayed in a defensive position within our borders. And who are the Gazans and Hamas celebrating? The worst kinds of terrorists being released from our prisons. Not only do they want them released from our prisons in Israel, but they want them back in their societies. That speaks to the very bright, clear distinction between our society and what is taking root and branch inside Gaza Strip. Just a quick comment. I can't gainsay the statements of the hostage family members, nor would I dream of doing so. But I do want to put a couple of points across. The first point is that it's remarkable not only Donald Trump's attachment to this issue, but also the terminology he used. He regularly spoke of our hostages. Mm-hmm. The viewers might remember that there was a question after Dan Alexander came back, the last living American citizen, whether he would stay so attached, so focused on this issue. He certainly did. And also, there was a lot made about the idea that Prime Minister Netanyahu was uninterested in bringing back the hostages. And all through the war, he expressed very clearly, and listen, this happened on his watch. He will have to conjure with that. Everybody recognizes that. Hopefully he does as well. But all through the war, he said that he was dedicated to bringing back the hostages and he was dedicated to crushing Hamas. And he thought that only military pressure would bring about the return of our loved ones to us. Now, he withstood enormous international pressure, enormous domestic pressure in order to keep the boot on the neck of Hamas. We were told, can't go into Rafah. He went. We were told, you can't go to Gaza City. He went. I think that he does deserve some credit here. Of course, he's also ultimately responsible for the disaster that occurred on October the 7th. But you have to give credit where it's due. He did not relent from the task.